She has also been active in training trainers on how to gather news and also how this can be broadcast in mother tongue. And she's worked a lot with people with disabilities and also worked with radio for women and girls who've dropped out. Next to me, last but not least, our sole male panelist today, which makes a nice change, is Nur Hasim, who is founder and head of the New Men Alliance in Indonesia, and he's very active in promoting gender equality and gender-based violence prevention by targeting men in the campaigns that they do, and a lot of important work he's doing. I've heard from him personally, and he's got some really good stories to tell. So without further ado, I think I will hand over to Milica, who will give us, I hope, a little bit of a broad outline around the issues of diversity and inclusiveness on a more global scale. And then we will go to the other panelists after that. Milica, over to you. Thank you.
I'll use one of the few Bahasa words I know, terima kasih. It's really wonderful to see how many people here actually are from Indonesia, which means in this country there is already understanding of importance and relevance of inclusion and diversity. Gender, it can be physical, mental abilities, sexual orientation, language, just name it. Whatever makes us different from each other. It doesn't mean better than each other, which in many societies, media understand as who is better. No, it's just we have different identities and we carry on different identities. I was born in Serbia, which is very south of Europe. I've been living in Britain for 25 years, so I'm British, so dual nationality, dual identity when we talk about passports. It was only when I came first time to Indonesia that my very good friend and colleague, Dr. Ada Armando, said to me when we were touring Indonesia somewhere in Madan at an event with journalists, he says, Milica, you are the first Western person who understands us. And I looked at him and I said, I've never seen myself as a Western person. Mm-hmm. So how your identity changes depending on, where you are, not only physically, but, and our identities are actually very fluid. And there is no such a society made of one race, one ethnicity, one religion. All societies are very heterogeneous. When I came first time to Indonesia, it was at the time when Obama was campaigning for presidency, and my colleagues, journalists in Indonesia, said, oh no, he has no chance, having Muslim father. They all were very proud because Obama spent his childhood years in Indonesia. Well, 2 years later, when we are again talking, and says, see, it happened. Do you think it's possible in Indonesia that someone of religious background, which is not dominant, win? Well, we'll see. When I was last time in Indonesia in September, the mayor of Jakarta was someone who came from a very minority background, Chinese Christian, and we were like, could this happen this time in Indonesia? So, for media to actually understand, and I always avoid using word promote, because the role of journalists is, I believe, not to promote, but I use the word embrace. So if we want journalists, and my background is in journalism, to embrace diversity which does exist in every society, then we need to help journalists actually learn basic techniques. But more important is we have to talk to media owners, to what we call media decision makers, because the fish stinks from its head. That's what we say in the Balkans where I'm from, and that's the fact. You as journalists or you as journalism students, you can try your best. When we have journalists coming to our training and they get like very enlightened, you know, with all this training, and then they go back to the newsrooms and the editors say, yeah, that's all nice. When you become an editor, you do whatever you like. Now I'm in charge. So we try to talk to media decision makers, getting them to understand not only the values of freedom of expression as a fundamental right, and that's where diversity comes from, and the obligation of the journalist to reflect diversity, but also the commercial value of diversity. If you diversify your content, you bring new audience, so you broaden your platform. In case of commercial media, you can raise your profits. If you diversify your content, you then, you know, broaden your platform, and your credibility, your respect can raise. But journalists, media organizations cannot do everything themselves. That's why Media Diversity Institute, 10 minutes left. I only had 7 in total. Your math is a bit weird, but I'm happy to talk. So that's why we also work with civil society organizations or NGOs or whatever you call them. Unfortunately, at this era of post-truth populism, more and more, you know, organizations which are actually there to represent the citizens, to bring the voices of members of society, the journalists, are being more and more disqualified as a Western concept, if we are talking of developing countries, or, you know, or they have their own agenda. So it is important, and I probably finish soon here, to work with different stakeholders, with media industry, with civil society, and with media educators. And, you know, if you don't learn when you are studying communications or you are studying journalism, if you don't learn, you know, the importance of freedom of expression and why, by bringing different voices, you can raise the quality of your media outlet, it's very difficult once you already get into some kind of positions. Then you become like your editors. They all know everything and hard to change. But they can change too, and I can talk about it. But basically, yes, it's important to work with different stakeholders. We've done that in different parts of the world, and I can bring examples if it needed. And what I would end this part of my presentation with, because of all this, you know, post-truth, you know, and fake news, or now they don't call it fake news anymore, they try to find a more appropriate expression. We talk more and more in Media Diversity Institute about non-for-profit media. And I would like to talk about that maybe later on. Public media services are a great way to reflect diversity if they are real public media services. Unfortunately, in 95% of the countries I worked in, and I worked in more than 70 countries, public media services just carry on that name. They're completely, totally controlled by the state, by the ruling, you know, party, and we all pretend. And I'll end by quoting my colleague from Bosnia. When the war was over in Bosnia, BBC Media Action came to help state television and radio get transformed into public media. And then I was in Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, talked to my colleagues, and he says, how is now? He says, well, they pretend they transformed us, we pretend we've been transformed. That's public services, unfortunately, in most of the countries.
Thank you, Melita. Maybe I can just follow up with a quick question just to say, you've raised something which I think is very important, and that is diversity pays, if you're correct, in that the media in itself is more diverse and its coverage is more diverse, then in actual fact if one can convince the management, a lot of these media houses, that diversity pays, that it in fact accrues in revenue. Can you tell us just quickly how you try to convince media owners and managers that diversity is the right way to go? And do they believe you when you say that in actual fact it makes commercial good sense?
I wouldn't put such a straight line, diversity pays, because it is a bit more complex. Because if you, for instance, depending on a society, if you bring voices from, say, LGBT community, and if LGBT is something which is not socially acceptable, in some countries, as you know, is outlawed still, then, you know, you might lose the audience, unfortunately. So it's a bit more complex, but it can be the case in some media which bring, for instance, members of the communities which are actually commercially doing well. And I'll give the example of Leicester Mercury in Britain, which was at one point the third biggest regional paper. But they came with a whole program how to embrace diversity of the region, because Leicester Mercury by 2030 is going, white people in Leicester region are going to be minority by 2030. So there are a lot of people, after each war on this planet, there is new group of people come to that region. So they introduced the program, they started talking to local leaders of local communities, they started advertising their business, leaders then recommend, you know, introduce topics which, you know, people in Leicester Mercury were not aware of. So they brought a lot of different story ideas, new voices, and, you know, commercially it has paid, but it's much more complex than, you know, European Union tried to do 2 studies on that, and they could not put easily the equality, diversify the newsroom, diversify media content. Therefore, it's a bit more complex, but it can pay off in all different ways, respect, credibility too. Exactly, and one would think that just by covering a wider community, there would be a wider audience to the media in question. So that's possibly another area. It is one of the areas that could be. Great. Thank you, Melita. We're going to turn to Jane now and talk a little bit about women, because as most of you know, women in media, the picture may have improved a little bit, Jane will tell us, but as far as my information goes, it seems that the glass ceiling is still very much in place for women at the top in media, and obviously as concerns coverage of women in media is still, you know, as I say, we're still battling to break through those barriers. So I hope Jane will talk to us a little bit about that, and also possibly the issue of online. We're talking obviously media in a generic term, but we've got to refer to traditional and online, and I hope Jane's got some thoughts in that regard, even online harassment of women among other marginalized groups. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Thanks, Gwen. Yes, so I am from the International Federation of Journalists, which is the global body that represents journalists, trade unions and associations around the world. When we talk about diversity, you know, my charge is to look after and forge the direction for the Asia Pacific, and we've got pretty much the most diverse region you could have when you talk about languages, culture, economies. So we have a lot of interesting work that we do here in the Asia Pacific region, working with our 33 affiliates across 23 countries in this region. When we talk about the numbers of journalists that we're looking after and representing, that equates to about 52,000 journalists. And of those, about 7,500 of them are women. Now, you know, women are still not in equal representation in newsrooms, and we know that. A few years ago, the UNESCO and UN Women supported us in doing a study to look into the experience of gender and in the media, and to see whether our expectations and thoughts about the media were actually true. And I mean, what it showed us is that, you know, there's still a lot of work to do, but there's some good news as well. And I think it's important that we do look to those bright spots as well. Yep. But, you know, the main story was that there is more women every day, every week entering the media. The women journalists who are entering the media are often more highly qualified than their male colleagues. So they're coming with a wealth of experience, but they still only represent 3 in 10 newsroom staff. When it gets to management and senior decision-making roles, they're only sitting at 1 in 10. So we talk about glass ceilings and we talk about sticky floors, because what we're finding is that women journalists are really embracing and being embraced in the media in a lot of ways, but they're not progressing in their careers. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Part comes down to cultural and social pressures, but also when you talk about male dominance in the newsroom, contracts that are not flexible for families, late night shifts that are not amenable to women to travel home at night. All of these things create a problem for women working in the media. There's also the issue of sexual harassment. So in the work that we did, we surveyed men and women. So this isn't, it was important for us to realise that and to get the perspectives of both men and women and transgender people in the media. And, the issue of sexual harassment, is one example that about a third of the people we surveyed had witnessed sexual harassment in the workplace. 18% of the women we interviewed had experienced it personally. So again, that's another issue. Male journalists earn about 16% more on average than women journalists. That's slightly less than the global average, which I think is around 20% when we talk about pay gap. In terms of workplaces, and just to quickly clarify this, so the countries that we looked at was quite a range from Pakistan, India, Nepal, Malaysia, Vanuatu, Cambodia, so a range of countries that we looked at in doing our work. Most workplaces, it's surprising to me, but most workplaces still don't have gender or diversity policies. 75% of workplaces did not have a policy, and these sort of things can make a difference when we talk about how media themselves represent society. Because how can the media actually bring about change if the media itself is quite pigeonholed to the male in their 30s demographic, or whatever it may be, depending on your country. So it's about sort of challenging the breakdown in the newsroom so media can start reflecting society a bit better. But the other thing that we looked at was where these bright spots were, where the good stories are coming through and where some innovation is happening. So, for example, in Cambodia, there's still a struggle for women to be entering the media, but they're carving out a space in online as bloggers, or they call themselves cloggers in Cambodia. In Indonesia, we've got the IFJ affiliate ADGI is doing a fantastic program that is monitoring media covering gender and marginal communities, and just seeing the aim being to give greater access and voice to women and others, including LGBT experience. In Nepal, you have the union there that it's actually made changes to its constitution to ensure that women make up a proportional representation within that union, because likewise with unions, how can you have advocacy if you've got 90% or 95% men advocating, so you need to have that breadth of experience. In most countries, actually, I would say that radio is a fresh ground that is providing a huge space for women journalists. From Nepal, you've got seven women AM radio stations throughout Nepal. In Afghanistan, there's women-only radio stations that are about educating Afghan women about domestic violence and their rights. Another good example of innovation is mentoring programs. Now, these operate in various countries, but there's a particularly good one in Sri Lanka the Sunday Observer and Salon Today, where you have active mentoring through newsrooms, and that's helping to take people and take women to a place where they can feel empowered and step up. Because some of the problems that we have is, you have this downward pressure where women are not being encouraged to move, but also you have an issue where women are not stepping forward. So how do we begin about changing this mindset that somehow women shouldn't be in decision-making roles? And that comes from women themselves as well. And it's a big challenge for the IFJ in terms of the work that we do in trying to get gender equity and mainstreaming as a natural thought. It shouldn't be something in an ideal world.
Yeah.
This shouldn't be something that we have to train on. It really should just be second nature.
Yeah.
That in the stories that we produced and in the hiring policies that we have, that you naturally have a representation of society.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet, But so the trainings that we do are very much about bringing men into the room and opening their minds up and hearing each other's stories, but also having men out there, flying the flag on this. This is really critical, and so we're very much supportive of men being that voice, guiding others and influencing others.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of the training that we do. And it means that you've got a news agenda that's equally driven when that starts happening. I'm just worrying about time. But
Jane, can I quickly just interrupt you and say, we heard on an earlier plenary about someone who said to us, the media should give us the beautiful stories as well and not just the negative ones. And just hearing you speak about particularly that woman-owned radio station, I think you said, those are the good news stories, and I think when we get to Nur, we'll come up with that as well.
Yeah.
Could you give us just a few paragraphs, if you like, with more and more voices going online, including obviously women and marginalised groups, and it's a question I hope Melita will get to later as well.
Yeah.
Are you having to deal with a lot more online harassment of women, and in particular in your case, and as I say, I'll ask the others later about marginalised voices who it seems have such a great opportunity to have online space, but if they're being shut down due to harassment and hate speech, that kind of defeats the purpose. Can you give me just a quick few words on that?
This is becoming one of the biggest issues for us in terms of our campaigning and advocacy, and in fact we just did a campaign across the region following International Women's Day, because it's not isolated. This is not isolated to Asia. This is a global phenomenon. Early in the piece, there was this idea, among the tech heads and online geeks, that somehow the internet would eliminate this idea of gender being an obstacle. And in fact, what we're seeing is a disproportionate amount of violence online being directed at women, and this has the effect of either shutting women journalists down or driving them out of spaces that presented initially so much opportunity. So being women journalists being trolled, simply having an opinion can be enough to launch a tirade, and it's been particularly vicious in some countries. India has got a quite distinct challenge in terms of online harassment. There's people like Laurie Penny has written about this and talked about the quote she used was a woman's opinion is the miniskirt of the internet. It's this shock thing. To be online is enough. And voicing an opinion is enough to create shock and repel people so much that they want to, send threats that they will rape or kill you.
Shocking.
And it's shocking. So, one of the Indian journalists we've spoken to has likened it to being, attacked by a swarm of bees. This attack online is just ferocious, and it takes a particular strategy to try and overcome it. And I don't think anyone's got the answers on that yet. But I certainly, there's one thing to say, well, you've got to have a tough skin, a thick skin, or just ignore it. But when these threats become quite real, that's impossible to do. So,
sure.
We think this is where the big conversation has got to happen with media houses. Taking more of a role, like so many companies have a social media policy that is about protecting the well-being of the business. But there's no policy that's there to protect the well-being of the journalists who are being, attacked.
Exactly.
And so, we've created a draft media policy that we hope media companies will start implementing to sort of counter some of these attacks and protect women, because the last thing we want is when women are entering the media
Exactly.
to be pushed back out.
Thank you, Jane.
So
That's very important, and hopefully we can, as we focus forward through this session, we can look at ways in which we can actually help protect those voices online. I'm going to turn now to Nuur, who's doing very good work, a very difficult job, I'm sure it is, to convince a lot of men why they should be equal to women. So I think without further ado, I'll hand over to him and let us hear from him some of his work. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen, and good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, I would like to share, because I'm the only panelist that doesn't have media experience, but I would like to share about I and my colleague concerns on one aspect that I think really important in fostering gender equality, which is engaging men and boys in achieving gender equality and in anti-violence against women advocacy. Why addressing men and boys? Because we believe that in equal and inequality gender relation, partly due to the patriarchal concept, values and norms of masculinity, in which men are characterized by physical strength, superiority, domination, and to some extent violence. And our media participate in sustaining and also even strengthening this image of men in our society. So I think this why we should address or transforming men, and we also believe that addressing this issue, I mean transforming men, is a crucial as a complementary of great work that already done by a feminist group or women's group in Indonesia, which empowering a woman through increasing women access and control of resources, including media. So for us to achieve gender equality and also to end violence against women, it is important to empower women, but it is not enough with the transforming men. So this is the idea about why we should address men in the effort of achieving gender equality and ending violence against women. And what we have done to address men's group and boys, what we have done is like creating space for men where we can discuss and criticize the traditional concept of men and masculinity. And at the same time, we also introducing and promoting the diversity of men's life and practices. So I think this is important. And also through this space, we are raising awareness among men about the cause or the negative consequences of the traditional concept of men. For instance, men have to suppress their feelings to show that they are strong emotionally. And also, for instance, the tendency of men to get involved in risky and unhealthy behaviors, like men's involvement in alcohol abuse or substance abuse. So this is really important to raise awareness among men, and also at the same time telling them about the benefit of being more equitable persons. For instance, the engagement of men in looking after their kid, it will change their relationship with their children at home, or also the engagement or sharing responsibilities with women, whether in domestic or public spheres, will reduce social and cultural and also economical burden for men. So I think this is also important. And another point that really important in this space is train men about emotional literacy, and also train them about social skill, like train them on how to manage their anger, and also on how to have a good positive communications and so on. Because by having emotional literacy and also having non-violent attitude and behavior, men can be a role model for the young generation. So I think this is for us is very important. So I think media can support our work in also creating space in the media on where that allow men and masculinity can be discussed and criticized. And also, I think it's also important for our media to present the different image of men, like men who love their children, men who supportive, men who respect women, men who show their opposition toward violence, and also the men who see women as an equal partners. And I think this is, and also the men who actively involved in the movement like anti-sexual violence, for instance. So I think it is also important. And another thing, media can support this kind of movement is by covering the story of the change that made by men, for instance, men who stopped their violent behavior, men who stopped drinking alcohol, men who support women leadership. So I think this is for me it is important to address men and boys to achieve gender equality and in end the violence against women advocacy. So this is I think my ideas on our engagement in.
Thank you, Noor. That's as I say, because we've chatted earlier, and Noor was telling me, and there's some positive and there's some negative, right? That a lot of the work Noor is doing has really had positive impact. In one of the villages, a woman has been elected at a very local level, which never happened before, which he felt is as a result of this conscientizing of men that women can do. So there's good news as well. On the other hand, there's negative in that Noor himself has kind of been marginalized, if you like, and identified as someone who is working in an area he shouldn't be, and has been called names by tabloid media for doing the work he's doing to try and change the perceptions of men. Noor, so what were you really think it's absolutely critical the media, your work would be so much more enhanced if the media could pick up, especially on the positivity of showing, as you say, those male role models who've made a difference, who've changed. And have you got an example you'd like to share with the audience briefly before we move on?
Yes, I think what we have done had covered by media. I think this is a good for this kind of movement, because now the problem is our young boys, they have no reference to be men. So in our mainstream media, as I said before, that men are characterized by violence and competition, domination and superiority. So the role of the media in promoting the new image of men is really important to influence the new generation to be more respect to the woman, and also to be a partner for the woman in any sectors. And as you said that we also get negative response. For instance, when we introducing this issue in the public, like there's one tabloid in East Java, the tabloid is Umat, something like that. They released the report that the New Men Alliance is the enemy of Islam because they're promoting gender equality and domestic violence and so on and so on. So I think this is the challenge that we face when we introducing this kind of in the public. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you very much, Neo. I'm sure we'll come back to that during question time and audience remarks. We're now going to hand over to Beth, who apparently is going to have to go over to the controls because she's going to show us some slides as she presents. Thank you, Beth.
Hello. Good afternoon, and while I'm putting on the slides, because we're talking about marginalized, I can feel I'm marginalized now. I'm separated. Okay? I hope you will enjoy working with the indigenous people, because I directly involve myself as a media practitioner to be living with a tribe, with a certain tribe in the Philippines. And it's quite voluntary, quite hard, because you really have to be with them, live with them, and work for them, so that you can only hear and listen to their voices. You really have to spend time to be with these indigenous people. These are examples of women empowered in media, our technical team, who are all women, no more men. I hope next time our television, I hope you won't lose your jobs, but our women are examples of women in media. Congratulations. Okay.
So we quickly, maybe give you that few minutes, Beth, just to get things together there. Is there anybody from the floor who'd like to make any comments or, yes, please, on anything that's been said? Please go ahead. Is there, oh, you have to go there, to the microphone there.
Oh.
Thank you.
Oh.
Hello. Okay, thank you very much. Please let me introduce myself. My name is Baskoro Arisan Soko. I'm a student, undergraduate still, but I initiated a media, actually an Islamic media named Muslim Biasa in the last of 2016. Muslim Biasa literally means ordinary Muslims. Like, yeah, ordinary Muslims. Like, if I ask Mr. Nur Hashim, what Muslims are you? Muslim Biasa. Ordinary Muslims. So that we can voice Muslims in Indonesia that normally are voiceless. Like there is a transgender pesantren, is like a school, Islamic school in Yogyakarta that not really have the place in mainstream media, and that's why Muslim Biasa is existed for that aims, and that so we can voice every kind of voices in Muslims, and relating in the themes of this session, I want to give comments that actually in our society, or in the youngsters, in millennials, youth in Indonesia, if we view the medias about women, or about women and how women are represented, and there are two boxes that we can see. The box of the medias that promote a more traditional kind of woman, like this mainly from religious medias, or in this case Islamic medias, is enforcing the views that women should be in, domestic realm, marriage in early age, nikah muda dan sebagainya. That is promoted by many accounts in social media, like Facebook, and anything, even line account, social media line account from Korea, and that's it. And the other box is a feminist media, or a liberal feminist media that depict how women should be liberated, but usually in how women should be liberated in a liberal paradigm. And the problem is, this media is boxed in opposite sides, and there is no bridge between them. So there is not technically a dialogue between them, and that makes young women in Indonesia will fall in either in this side or this side, but without any dialogues between them, and that makes women who are in the liberal feminist box will be considered too liberated, which is actually is an out term, too liberated. How can you be too liberated? But and then the woman in this side and the other side, in the conservative sides, will be considered too
repressed.
Yeah, too repressed, to oppressed. But actually, both of the sides are technically shows how they view how women can express themselves as intersectional, and that being a feminist should not be just white feminist ideas. There are also a lot of ideas about feminism itself. So I think our media should have innovation to having this bridge, so that there is actually a real dialogue between these two boxes. So there is a real public discourse happening between women's, or even men's, or even who are not being in women and men's, so that there's a real public discourses, and how inclusiveness and gender equality can be achieved and can be fostered. So if there is no media that can bridge these two boxes, I think there won't be any equalities on diversity, because that diversity itself won't be happening except without dialogue.
Okay.
Thank
you very much for that point.
Hopefully that we can get to a point at some point down the track where we're not talking about boxes and other ends of the spectrum, but that we're talking about a range of experience and a mix of experience.
and voices for all that range of groups. But thank you for that. I think, Beth, are you ready for us, or do you want me to give you a bit more time, or are you okay? Really?
Okay, so this is it.
Great.
You cannot give what you don't have. Unless you listen, you won't hear the voice. This is media framing and imagery of the marginalized groups and hearing the voice from within. It is a presentation from the Foresight Media Center and with the Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union. Let me introduce first the work of the Corstein Media International Services. It is the country coordinator of the Asia-Pacific Broadcasting Union, which provides services through trainings, forums, symposium, and workshop to the media practitioners and network services, and to the non-media, in particular, the marginalized groups. Let me introduce also the Asia-Pacific Broadcasting Union, which is the largest union of the broadcasters. It is a non-government and not-for-profit association of broadcasters and broadcast industry players, and it is the founding member of the Global Alliance on Media and Gender under the leadership of UNESCO. And now it's celebrating 54 years of service to the Asia-Pacific region. And how does the marginalized media work with the marginalized group, the mainstream media? So I would like you to work and to look at the marginalized groups, which include the indigenous group, the girls and women, the persons with disabilities, the people suffering from psychiatric, neurologic, and psychosocial illness, which we took for granted, the self-employed, the farmers and fishermen, the vendors and the local groups, the persons in detention, the LGBT. We are working not only from the point of media practitioners, but we have to hear the voices of these different groups. The ABU and the UNESCO, through the technology innovation, developed this radio in a box to have a smart community. RIB, which is a portable and economical radio system, was developed by Asia-Pacific Broadcasting Union, and this is one of the innovations and the tool that we are using, in particular, in the different groups in the Philippines. How does the concept of framing influence the society? And how does media imagery affect the audience and the presenter? So we have the audience and the media for the content. We talk about children and how do we frame it. This is another frame of children living in the same community but of different moods, of different family situations. We talk about the mother tongue as one of our languages or as one of the communication, and we are now developing the different mother tongue vehicles. So in the Philippines in particular, there are around hundreds of languages. So from the media industry, how can we reach and how can we listen if there is none from our media group that will go there? Imagine if there are 7,000 islands in the Philippines and these people will be talking about different things, we cannot relate unless that we go there. These are the children. I hope that they are clear. Okay. We talk about women. The women in the mountains carrying the piles of the rocks, carrying the piles of these heavy metals that they are using from one mountain to another. And from a media point of view, how shall we go over this? Are we going to use this as only a content and then make it commercial and then get sponsors and show it? So what is the output and how can you relate? How can you be of help? That is the real focus of this talk. Okay, you can see this area is dry, but during June, July, and August, there will be landslides. It will be flooded. And all of these people living there, the women, the children, the men, will be climbing up the mountains, climbing up on the trees. So you can imagine. We don't want to sensationalize, and we don't want to be happy that we are on top of the disaster-prone area because of the two typhoons, the signal. We have Yolanda, Typhoon Haiyan, and we also have the Typhoon Lawin. And I don't want to capitalize. We don't want the media to talk about disaster. We want to talk about the resiliency on how the Filipinos survive. We talk about the men empowerment. Can you see it? Can you see the man holding the baby? So it's the other way around. So the man stays at home, and the woman works for the family. So that's man empowerment. Okay, you can also see two different family situations. That woman was carrying the baby. That man is carrying a baby, but they are not husband and wife. They are just neighbors. Okay, we introduced the radio in a box. This is another area. And when you talk about this women empowerment, we work with the 157 teachers. We work with them, all women, and I think there are only 10 men. Okay. Then we talk about the Filipino media industry in the Philippines. And it has been an inspiration with the Filipino campus journalism. Because I think the Philippines is the only country in Southeast Asia that has the Republic Act, the law, that we have to teach journalism and broadcasting as early as 9 years old. So you can see that we have, I can't say that we have a very good press freedom in the Philippines, but as early as 9 years old, everyone can voice out, even the kindergarten. And I hope that our government won't suppress it, as what you hear over the news, that there are some networks now that are being cut, but it's not as brutal as it is. We still can voice out, our college students, the teachers, whoever. In the Philippines, press freedom is guaranteed under the Constitution. But let me also note this, but it is somehow regulated by the government to some extent. And in conclusion, reframe the image of media, where conclusion is granted and accepted. And I can say salamat po, because in the Philippines, we are free to talk, even if the gun is in front of you. No matter how much money will be given, I can say I'm proud to be a practitioner, because my dad has worked with the different networks and he survived. We survived. It's only in the matter of your ideology. It's only in the matter of your conviction. If you are working with the marginalized groups, I tell you, Philippines is a very good experimental work. I can tour you around with the 7,100 islands if you really would like to work with. We have the women, we have the men, and we also have the children, and so many things to work for. So I just hope that this World Press Freedom Day will be an eye-opener for all of us in Asia. If we have done that in the Philippines, we can also do it to the rest of the world. Good day.
Thank you very much, Beth. And as you pack up, maybe I can just aim a question in your direction, Beth, and that is, it strikes me it's so important to give the marginalized communities a voice, such as the one you've been working with in the Philippines. But to what extent, when you give them a voice, are they heard? Are they just speaking to their own group, their own community, or are those women role models of the Filipino media there telling the story of those marginalized communities to a wider audience? Would you like to just quickly comment on that, and we'll open to the floor. Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because it's in the other slide that went out. Okay, what we do is that we group these people, these women, we start with the women, with the indigenous groups, and then we train them. We really have these women in the tribal groups, shall I use that? They are the ones broadcasting. They are the ones telling their stories. It's not fabricated. Really have to listen to them. So it's not only the broadcasters that are making the news story. It's not only the broadcasters making the feature story. It is really the people from the community telling their own stories. So there might be some parts that are edited, but not changing the real story of the life. For example, I hope that this will also be used as an example. Before, in the Mangyan tribes, this is in Mindoro. These women are just following the men. You can imagine. The man walking in front, the woman following. You can never be ahead of the man. So it's somewhat like in slavery. So when we took the time for that women to broadcast of what's happening, it calls the attention of the human rights and the, how they call this, the Commission on Women. So we went up to the mountains and then have some gatherings, some capacity building, some talks to the women together with the men. And it has been documented, and we produced a documentary. I have the documentary in the other slide, where the women were also were really telling their stories. So we are training them. We're training them, not only talking. This is what I'm calling that you don't get the news. You have to ask somebody from the community to write the news together with you.
Exactly. Thank you for that, because I think that's very important, that we're not talking to and at those communities, but they themselves have a voice. Could we ask for questions and comments, please? Let's start with this gentleman here, then there, and then you. Thank you. I think you need to go to the microphone. If we could be as quick as possible, I'd appreciate it.
I'll try.
Yes.
Leif Lundsman from a tiny nation called Denmark up in Europe. We have two national minorities in my country, and the Danish national public broadcaster serves them in their own language. I'm told that the Philippines have around 175 linguistic minorities, and since language is a common denominator for identification, I'm curious how you serve 175 plus minorities within the broadcast media.
Groups. Thank you for your question. Would you like to answer that? Then we'll turn to the next
Yes,
question. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I am working with the Commission of Indigenous People, okay, and that's not only 179. That's the recorded one, but there are more. So how do we do it? We have the Commission on Indigenous Peoples. So there are 18 regions of the Philippines. So each region has its own commission, regional commission, and we gather them all. Budget-wise, yeah, it's so hard. But you know, when you work with these people, leaving them, I personally lived with them, where you have the goats under your beds, the wooden beds. So you can see, how do we connect them? When you go to the mountains, they have a leader. So if there are 3 mountains, you have to call all the leaders, sit down with them during nights. You can imagine climbing the mountain trails, that when you look down, it might be between life and death, but you have to do it. So we sat down with them overnight, listen to their stories. So that's one, archived. We archived their stories. If there are 18 regions, we can come up with the 18 archives, okay? And then we have the broadcasting. So they will be the one to air, one at a time. We have the local network, and we also have the national network. So that's how we work. We do not work only as one team. We have the stakeholders. Course Line is a stakeholder. ABU is a stakeholder. ABU really supported Philippines in some indigenous projects. They brought the RIB, the Radio in a Box. We tried. We tried in 2 areas of Tuguegarao City, which was hit by Typhoon Lawin. So we already had the training with them when the typhoon struck Tuguegarao. So did I answer your question, sir?
Yeah. In which language?
Locals, not the 179 languages.
But some of them.
Yes, some of them. So we already have the top mother tongue, around 23, and then the local radio networks will translate it. For example, in the morning, we have the English version translated by a provincial in their own language, in their mother tongue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. The gentleman, please.
Hi, my name is Munir. I am from the International Federation of Journalists in the Middle East and the Arab world. Sorry, I don't want to sound determinist in the term of power of economy in making the social change in our societies, our life. But I want to draw the attention to the importance, when we are talking about gender equality, about the importance of equal pay and keeping the standards of living for, like women paid are like men. In 2015, in Tunisia, it was the year when women journalists outnumbered men. So there were more women journalists working in Tunisia than in men, by 55 to 45%. And we thought that was actually, it's a success, because that's when women becoming the voice in the media. But actually it has another bad side, a sad story, where because journalism started paying less salaries, men started migrating from journalism, doing other business, and leaving the poorly paid profession for women to work in. So I would come back to Beth, what she mentioned about the colleagues here. I hope they are good paid. I hope the journalists are good paid, you know, who become women taking over this profession. So it's important with the message of gender equality to actually to emphasize the importance of equal payment, decent salaries for women who will be promoted or brought into the profession. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any comments from the panel briefly on that? But I think we accept. Milita?
Yeah, thank you, Moira, for us. I just related to the language issue. Probably language is the most problematic, to use the wrong word actually, because it's not a problem, it's your identity. But how do you make the bridge between mainstream population and the language minority?
Yeah.
And in many countries they came with the wrong solutions, actually contributing to further ghettoization of minorities. Here is a space Saturday morning for you, for your language, in your language, and does between
content to Indigenous storytelling now. I mean, part of the problem that we've had in Australia for many years is that for so long the stories of Indigenous Australians were being told by white people, and it was a very negative story. It was very one-sided, and it's only now that we've actually, at the ABC, they've exceeded that target of they set a target of 2.6, and I think they're higher than that now. But we're seeing, what we're seeing now on our screens in Australia is we're seeing, you know, Aboriginal humour, Aboriginal cooking shows, and just the diversity of experience, and there's so much more that the Australian community is learning through that policy that started from within, and employing Aboriginal journalists, employing Aboriginal content makers, and it's actually changing the whole. BBC, they actually dock some of the senior program managers' wages if they don't meet their diversity targets in terms of employment. So things like this, these are the sort of discussions that we need to be having in terms of changing the mentality inside media organisations.
Absolutely. And yet I just want to raise, in as much as and with this panel wants to talk about innovation as far as it comes to inclusion and diversity, at the same time, as much as we innovate and we're trying to give rights to these groups, women and other marginalised groups, whatever they may be, online or otherwise, that at the same time there seems to be this sort of backswing of conservatism. If we look at Trump's America, if we look at phenomena like that, where suddenly right-wing elements are coming out of the closet everywhere, and as quickly as those voices, we raised it earlier, are coming online, they're being shut down or they're being harassed and pursued, and hate speech is so. If any of the panel or the floor would like to talk to how do we, again, it's like that box analogy earlier, how do we bring these threads together and as I say, give voice to those marginalized communities when there are other communities out there waiting to attack them when they do eventually find their voices, which seems kind of really sad. Don't know if anybody wants to vouch that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the salary. In our country this time, the broadcasters, the journalists receive, this is one of the law that is to be enacted, that the salary of the broadcasters in the local areas, in the province, will also be as the same rate as the one in the metro, meaning that whether you work for the indigenous, you work for the locals, you work for the city network, you will be receiving the same salaries.
Interesting.
So whether you're men or women, as long as you have all these requirements, that is to be regulated by the national standard salary scale.
Thank you for that. Jane, and
There
then Melita.
are collective agreements and there are salary standards, but unless companies open their books and actually declare and do audits of their pay, I mean, these standards can still be fudged, and women can be stuck on certain pay grades. So one of the things that we advocate is, look, if you're serious about gender equality and diversity, do an audit within your organisation. Show us how many women and men are employed, how many are in the decision-making roles. What are their, with obviously respecting privacy, but put it out there if you're serious. And some companies are prepared to do that. I think BuzzFeed is one of these companies that keeps coming out. Its figures, it's got more than 50% in terms of gender equality, more women working in BuzzFeed, and senior managers globally are women. What they don't have is the diversity. I think they're like 69% white, white. So they're not getting that diversity, but they are putting it out there. And I think
transparent
this is showing the way to change. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Jane. Melita?
Well, a couple of things. If we talk about gender or any form of diversity within the media organizations, again, it has to start from the top.
Absolutely.
So if there is no policies, if there is no strategy, if there is no program, it's very difficult to just talk to journalists, because the whole culture has to change. And there is another issue, and what's happening in Tunisia, it's quite, I would say, global. Women started to dominate by number the newsrooms and journalism faculties. But what's still a challenge, the higher you go in hierarchy, the less people coming from ethnic background, religious background, minority or women come. Solidarity is important. One thing I wanted to say, and then now I forgot what I wanted to say. When we were doing study together with the International Federation of Journalists, how are media in the European Union, very democratically developed part of the world, reporting on religion and ethnicity, we didn't come to very different conclusions from what we found in North Africa when you ask editors why did you allow this story to appear in your papers, they say, well, that's what journalists found out. They say, but you are talking about this particular group without interviewing anyone from this particular group, and that's quite common. What we found out in the European Union countries, that editors still believe that Europe is white and Christian, which is not the case. So it has to start from national level. There has to be understanding that inclusion is one of the basic principles of democracy. And without the inclusion of all voices, you cannot have an inclusive public debate for all citizens which exist in that society. And that's how we easily bring the war, when you exclude many communities. So it has to start from here. It has to be work with multiple stakeholders, media industry, civil society, whatever the governments think about NGOs. NGOs are the voice of the citizens, and they have to do their best to survive and push the governments to actually be inclusive. And then education, because the world is moving towards what is called alt-right, and this is something which journalism is not supposed to go to, particularly if we are talking about quality journalism, and that's what we are talking about, quality journalism as a public good. So if we agree that quality journalism should be public good, then we all have to fight, our governments to accept inclusion and understand why it is important for democracy.
Absolutely, Melita. I think I will take one or two more comments from the floor. We'll be running out of time very shortly. And I'd also like to just give the panelists an opportunity to focus forward and say, okay, if we're here again at this time or somewhere else this time next year, where do we want to be in terms of inclusiveness, in terms of diversity? So I'll leave them to think about that. Let me, I think you were first. Uni, then that lady just behind you, and then you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. I just want to make a quick comment on what I believe and what Rapplers did so far. I think we know that we are on the situation that become the team, the major team. We found that building not only the solidarity but the community is also important, online and offline. So, for example, one of our pillar is crowdsourced. That's really play important so we can reach this minority group. Sometimes the reason why the mainstream media cannot access them, first is lack of knowledge about them. So it's like there is a barrier, right? Mm-hmm. But if you can follow their appearance, their timeline, their social media posts, then you have early knowledge about them. So you have contact. It's different with, because I mean big corporations know where to find us as a media, but they are not. But by try to follow their appearance, their achievement through the social media, especially when there is something unfortunately bad thing happened in Indonesia when the LGBT group got harassed by even the minister. I mean part of the government. So we can follow them and then build the communication with them. Yeah. The second one is then the offline community building. Sometimes we have to spend time to share our expertise, especially in digital media. We train some of the NGO related with HIV/AIDS so they can share, they can marketing their idea to other media. I think this is also something that the media should spend their time. It's not like become the activists, but you know, sometimes they have a lot of good. I mean, even the indigenous, they have a lot of activities. They have a lot of work done, but they don't know how to reach the media. I mean, they put in Facebook, and some mostly the younger generation in newsroom not in the Facebook anymore, but in Instagram. So we have to reach them and say that probably if you want to reach the younger audience, you are not posting your work to Facebook, but through Instagram. That kind of thing is part of the building the community. So the solidarity will build from that kind of engagement. The last thing that also useful when we have to deal with hate speech. When this is I have to say that honestly, a lot of newsroom in Indonesia even is really carefully treating the minority-related stories, LGBT, whatever. And even I know one TV have policy not touching that issue at all. Yeah. So because they don't want to lose their audience.
Exactly.
Because the same like in Philippines, in Indonesia, if there is a national survey, most of the people will say no to the LGBT rights, I think. Yeah? So they don't want to lose this big bulk of audience. So, and then when we write about that, we got a lot of criticism, hate. I mean, in the right wing, we said the Muslim kafir. I mean, you are really you are selling something that against the God willing, that kind of thing. One form of hate. But because we already we built our community, we have a community offline, online, they will kind of like help us in that very bad or a crisis situation to, I mean, it's not fight back, but at least
to
with
get
us.
an access also.
Access.
Yeah.
So I still believe that the internet and the social media has the beautiful of wisdom of crowd. When there is a hate speech, there is another good people that will together debate in a positive
May
way.
I have that LGBT? Okay, in the Philippines it is accepted. The commissioner of the youth is a lesbian, and some of the government positions are gay, transgender. It's accepted in the Philippines.
We have the Minister of Tourism was gay too, actually. But this is if you do the national survey, I mean, there is our constitution.
Yeah,
actually
the constitution.
Honor that. But when the political and social situation going right, that even the central until the local leader will try to put themselves to the majority, which is the majority say that more and more people say that this is against the God's will. So our constitution also honor that. Even we have minister that gay. But
So
still,
I think this is only my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, we respect, but we do not force. What is important is that media accepts, and it is accepted in the Philippines for LGBT. So it's not being excruciated or something like you are taken away from the marginalized group, something like that. Unlike before, but now everyone can talk about I am a gay, I'm a transgender, so it's accepted.
the same.
right?
I think the same like Indonesia.
But it's an interesting conversation. It's what we mentioned, that underlying conservatism and talking about rights on top of that. And as you say, if asked the question, a lot of communities will align themselves with repression, even if they know otherwise. Can I very quickly take that young lady there, and there was one other person there, please, with the glasses. And then I think we're going to have to give time for the panel to wrap up. I'm sorry, people. Thank you. Very quick, please. Take to the microphone, please. And identify yourself, if you will.
Just quickly ask. Just want to ask about how the indigenous people that you're working with perceive the media output of your Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union, and how long did you spend the, can I say that, participatory filmmaking that you worked like that, or yeah. Because it's interesting for me.
Oh, it's so interesting. Because we're working with the Department of Education. We are working with the Commission on Higher Education. So just what Milka said, that education is really the basic and the foundation. We start with education. So it's so easy for us, quite easy for us, because we have thousands of teachers, and that if we choose one particular region, we'll spend around 2 to 3 months living with them, among them, and then transfer to another one, and then train the teachers. There are schools within the community of the indigenous people. So we have to train these teachers. We have to train the locals. First in English, not in Filipino, in English. And then have it in the mother tongue. So if you are talking about the time, we have been working with them for 7 years. So 7 years, and we have worked with around 15 groups. Quite toxic with our schedule, especially during rainy season. Okay?
Thank you very much. That young lady here in the front, and the last one behind you, very quick, please. We're right on deadline.
Okay, quick question. In countries where media is state-controlled and the culture of conservatism and patriarchy is incredibly deep entrenched, change has to begin at the top of the hierarchy, like you said. But what are the insights you can provide for us youths who are aspiring to be instrumental as agents of change to combat the laws and policies that stifle and silence the voices of minorities?
Can you repeat the question?
Just the question. It's the last.
What are the insights you can provide to youths who are aspiring to be instrumental agents of change to combat the laws and policies that stifle and silence our voices?
Well, the future is on youth. And I'm not saying anything revolutionary. That's normal, that's natural. Unfortunately, I cannot see enough young people responding and reacting to what's been happening in the world right now. If you want your future to look the way the current politicians are talking about, then you are not going to have future. So my advice is, that's in the nature of your age, to do things my generation is not doing, to do something really revolutionary. Do it. I cannot tell you how to do it because I'm not your age. You have to find your way, but you are lucky to have digital media, which my generation did not have when we were trying to change the world. You don't need to collaborate with mainstream media. There is all sorts of platforms you can use. If a president of the most democratic country of the world can communicate with his platform through Twitter, use any, they have to be scared of you, not the other way around. So get together, solidarity, work with youth, not only in your country, with the others. Have basic things. There are protests right now in the Balkans, young people are trying to do, but you can see that they don't know which way to go. Political parties are offering support and guidelines. Don't work with politics. Find your way, your really indigenous way, something that you are and no one else, and do it. We will follow you. We cannot lead you or advise you. We couldn't do better world.
Thank you, Milica. This is a time for uniqueness and innovation. There you go. That young lady, very quickly, and then please can we start with you, Jane, and quickly sum up from our panelists. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Michelle and I'm from Universitas Indonesia, and I would like to ask about gender equality in terms specifically about LGBT. So my concern here is that do medias that you're collaborating with now, or even when on the medias that you're working on now, do they provide enough transparency for them to confess their own gender orientations? I mean, do they have really the space for them to say, oh yeah, I'm lesbian or I'm gay, let's say like that? And if yes, to what extent, or do they have any limitation in terms of working on their news report? Let's say if, for example, I'm a lesbian or if a person is a gay, how do media manage for them not to be too emotional in writing the news? How could media manage so that they will be as emotionally distant as possible? And that's my questions. Thank you.
Who wants to take that? Jane, do you want to start summing up, and maybe if you could address that question as well, and possibly Neo also, as we just go along with the panelists. And maybe I can encourage everyone after the break, if our panelists are available, please grab them to ask any further questions you may have. Jane, do go ahead.
In terms of LGBT, I still think there is a long way to go, you know, for the media more broadly, to change the narrative and to get those stories out. I still think, you know, there's a huge learning curve for media practitioners and to take this on. And that, again, I always say change in media representation has to happen within media organisations first, because then they can begin telling those stories. So I do think it is still really a big struggle to get this story out, and depending on what country you are in, it can be quite different. I mean, transgender is not a huge issue in the Philippines. We've heard in parts of South Asia, it's not that, you know, there are multiple genders. So, you know, it's a cultural and national issue at times. To what the answer to that is, I think we've got to still keep listening and changing the narrative. Just in terms of summing up, and in terms of young people, I worry that there hasn't been as much activism that I would like to see in the world. But the other thing that I also say in these dire times. It takes terrible political times sometimes to bring out the best satire and to bring out the best journalism. And so for me, I actually consider that the time that we're going now as a war cry for good journalism, and we should be working really hard to investigate, to write good stories, to present all the facts, and to challenge, the alternate facts.
Thank you very much, Jane. Beth, any last words where we want to be next time, this time next year?
Okay, for LGBT, from the media point of view, you have to love this group. You generate the information that acceptance is number one. B, you boost the morale. Media can boost the morale of this group. And then T, transfer the information from the national medium, from English to the local language. For the IPs, or indigenous people, you have to integrate them. And P, you have the participatory. And for the RL or the other groups, we have to reach them. We have to listen to the voices. Unless that we listen to them and go to them, speak to them, you cannot hear the heart of these people. Whoever marginalized groups they belong to, you have to listen to them. And that's all. To capsulize everything, the word that I really would like all of us media people is to reach out, love, and respect.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Yeah, I think our challenge right now, especially in Indonesia, is the rise of religious fundamentalism, and one of them is homophobia. Even not only they don't accept the minority group like LGBT, but they also use the issue of the homosexuality to stigmatize like our movement. When we have a protest against sexual violence in Hotel Indonesia, a circle with our friend wearing miniskirt to protest about sexual violence in Indonesia, there's so many response telling that this is the group, this is a gay man, this is the from the LGBT group that trying to show up and then to protest sexual violence in Indonesia. So that is our challenge right now. And then my last comment, I think media should present different image of men to foster gender equality. The image of men that support women, the men who respect women, the men who see women as equal partners, and the men who oppose violence against women, including sexual violence or online sexual violence as mentioned by Jane. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil.
Minorities know much more than about themselves, about what they're going through. And that's what journalists keep forgetting. So don't go to members of any minority group only when you want to talk about that particular, because they are interested in tax changes, tax policies, in education, like everyone else. So that's the real inclusion when we talk about media content. Diversify newsroom must, but it does not mean that a blind journalist should be reporting on the issues of blind people or LGBT person.
Yeah.
It's just having in your newsroom someone coming from different group from yours makes you be more sensitive when you talk about the others. It's your contact, your channel to this other community you don't know enough. And it's, source of information. So that's what is diversifying newsroom in our understanding. Social media. There is a term you might have heard already, homophily. When I first time read it, I thought someone misspelled homophilia. but hemophilia. No, it's a new term used by academics for, maybe if you are not interested in the topic, you can leave already now. Homophily is people grouping about the same interests on social networks and talking only to each other. So people who have similar opinions, similar views, similar prejudice. And it's a new form of ghettoization. So yes, there is a fantastic space on internet, on social platforms, social media, but there is a danger of homophily, so be aware of that when you are building your community. And because we have master course in London, we call it diversity and the media, we keep telling our students, don't forget that everyone has prejudice. I have prejudice, you have prejudice, you have prejudice. We have different kind of prejudice. Yep. It's very difficult to get rid of them because they are deeply defaulted in our psyches. Once you become aware of your prejudice, then it's a step towards going beyond them. You know, you can manage them and you can produce really good journalism when you go beyond that. That's all.
Thank you, Melita. And I think that wraps up our panel session. Just to say briefly that I said it at the beginning, I say it again, this is a huge topic. Even with our experts here, we've only really touched the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more we could have, should have, would have discussed if we just had more time. But I just want to say we talk about minorities, we talk about the marginalized, but you know there's power in small as well. And I'm always reminded of what is one of my favorite quotes from author Margaret Mead, who said, never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I think to those communities themselves, the louder the voices, the more they have to show the world that they're there and to make everybody recognize them. So please, would you give a big hand to our panelists? Thank you to our audience. All the best. Thank you.